Hello, everyone. This is Chris Rennirt from Space Jockey Reviews, here with my co-host Zena S. Dixon, the real queen of horror, slicing into yet another specimen on Dissecting Cinema. How are you today, Zena?
I'm doing well, Chris. How about you?
I am doing just fine, I'm happy to say. It is my turn to introduce the case details this time, and our selection today is Europa Report. Are you ready to begin this dissection, Zena?
I'm ready.
Okay. Europa Report is the story of 6 astronauts who undertake a privately funded mission to the moon of Jupiter known as Europa in the spacecraft Europa 1. Their assignment is to investigate the existence of life on Europa because water has been discovered there, and they know, as we do, that wherever there is water, there is likely life. After a solar flare causes them to lose contact with Earth, morale is threatened and mental states are put to the test. But, like any good crew, they forge ahead with their mission, dealing with many otherworldly dangers along the way. Will they make it back to Earth? Will their data be saved or lost and gathered for nothing? Will the crew discover life on Europa? And if so, will that life be friendly, hostile, indifferent, or something we can't even imagine as mere Earthlings? These are just some of the questions waiting to be answered for all you home theater astronauts out there ready for the ride. Europa Report is directed by Sebastian Cordero with a screenplay by Philip Galat starring Charlotte Copley, Michael Nyqvist, Christian Carmago, Corlina Widra, Anna Maria Marinka, Mbeth Davitz, Isaiah Whitlock Jr., and Dan Fogler. And the movie is rated PG-13 for sci-fi action and otherworldly peril, to say the least. Zena, I'm going to let you launch the first rocket to Europa with your thoughts.
Oh, thank you, Chris. That was an awesome intro.
Well, you are very welcome. I'm glad I could offer that up here.
You always do a great job with that.
All right, thanks.
All right. Well, when I first found out that it was going to be a found footage film, I wasn't too thrilled about it or looking forward to it at first because sometimes when I think about found footage films, automatically my mind goes to Blair Witch Project. Even though it had a really cool theme to it and a great storyline, at least it was different at the time, but it just completely didn't deliver for me, especially the ending. But I have to admit, I was wrong. Watching the movie, it's like I found out that it was just, a full on adventure and it had plenty of thrills in there. Something that I felt like I really, really liked for some reason, which I normally don't, is how the film, it was mixed with the found footage, from the crew, and then they had the interviews.
Yes.
Do you remember that part? Yeah, I thought that that was really creative to do.
You mean in
It's
the beginning?
yes, in
When,
the
okay,
beginning.
yes.
And even though it's labeled as science fiction, I felt like it was somewhat of a horror. I don't want to give out spoilers unless you want me to.
I'm going to give out some spoilers and some of what I have to say. I would say just go ahead and say whatever you need to say to get it dissected really well.
Okay. Why I say it was delivered in a horror fashion is because pretty much the crew was getting knocked off, getting killed one by one. And that usually happens in a horror movie, particularly a slasher. Something else that I thought was pretty cool. I've never heard of the director before. I recently looked him up, and I was really impressed with the work that he's done with this particular movie, as well as with the actors and actresses.
Yes.
I've seen some of them in some other films as well, but they all did a pretty great job. I even thought the way it was shot, it looked great. Like especially when they were on the surface of Europa, and we could see like the icy cliffs.
Yes.
I thought that that looked really good. I have to admit though, I mean, I did have to watch the movie a couple of times to fully grasp what was going on, but I wasn't bored while watching it. I was fully entertained. In some ways, even though I was entertained, I felt disappointed, especially the last 20 minutes of it, because it's like it took about 40 minutes for actual chaos, I guess you can say, to start. And then by the time the ending rolls around, it's like, oh, come on. Because it's like, I felt like we should have at least got more. At least that's what I wanted.
Okay.
I just guess I was just expecting a little bit more action or at least interaction with what was going on outside of the spaceship.
Well, I accepted the fact that with it being a found footage movie, there would only be certain perspectives that we could get. I felt like you in that I wanted to know other things that were going on the planet, but I felt reasonably restricted by the camera footage that was available. And it was just one of those things that found footage movies force you to accept, or so they do me. But I had the same interest, and it was also part of that curiosity about what I could not know that somehow made it all the more compelling for me as I watched it. Once I got used to it, yes.
Okay. Well, okay. At least I'm not alone.
No, no, you're not alone. No, no. Maybe if you were out there on Europa, you might be
Oh,
alone, but not here on Earth.
I would
No.
never go out there. I'm sorry.
Well,
Those were-
actually, well, that was actually one of the questions I had ahead
Oh,
for you, but
I have that question as well.
okay, well, we'll get there, yes.
Okay, so what did you think about it? I'm pretty interested in
Well,
what your thoughts are.
well, I'm glad you're interested because I have thought quite a lot about it, and I have a lot of thoughts. So
Okay.
all I can say is this show might last a little longer than the average show because of all these thoughts. And if at any time along the way you want to jump in and say something, just jump in there and just say, "Hey, Chris, stop. I got to say something."
Okay.
Because this movie really had me thinking. I really liked Europa Report for a lot of reasons. So I whoops, okay. So I hit my microphone. I was so excited. Anyway,
It's okay.
I really liked Europa Report for a lot of reasons. For me, it begins with the retro style ride you get to times when science fiction was more serious and truly scientific, taking its time to get to the destination.
Hmm.
I've heard some people complain about this movie and talking about how slow it is, but for me, that gave it a more realistic feel, certainly more so than we get from most movies today that seem to rush through everything with frenetic and almost incoherent action. I'm sure you've seen plenty of those yourself. I like the way the movie was grounded in real science that we know and many things that were logical, if not experienced or discovered before. For example, scientists do actually believe, as I'm sure you also know, that Europa has ice on the surface with subsurface lakes of water kept in liquid form by an active iron core at the center. A lot of people don't know that, though, but here's the astronomy lesson in Dissecting Cinema here today. And NASA has actually identified and mapped an area on Europa called the Connemara Chaos Zone, which they do refer to in the movie, where ice has moved around and rotated over time and caused slush and everything to rise to the surface. So, of course, we also know that wherever there is water, the chances of life existing as well are much greater, if not probable. And I just really liked those realistic details. I like how they took the time to make the characters really human with flaws and insecurities that acted basically like real people would probably act in the same situations. There were no cliched characters there like an Ellen Ripley or any hero male types jumping in to save the day. There were only normal humans being heroes for all of humanity through very selfless acts for the greater good. It was just about ordinary people dealing with very extraordinary situations as typical people likely would, and I like that. Keeping it realistic that way helped to make it more realistic overall and focused on the more important matter of the human condition. What did you think about that?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, I also liked how the video and audio footage had the static dropouts. You remember those?
Yes,
Like
I
they
do.
went all to black. Actually, when this happened at first, I thought there was something wrong with my Blu-ray player or the TV, and I actually stopped to rewind it, or rather run it back and play it over before I finally realized that it was actually part of the movie. It was just done that well. I liked how the living quarters had the simulated gravity created as the section of that that section of the ship rotated. I thought that was another nice touch of science fact rather than fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And as I watched the movie, which was about an expedition to the only place in our solar system thought to have life, I was actually amazed that a movie on this subject had never been done before. It just seems to be such the perfect setting for a great realistic science fiction movie, and it's almost unbelievable, Zena, that some director, some writer has not come up with this idea before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really happy to be able to report that the first original story about that plot in a sci-fi movie was not a disappointing waste of my time. And this is, although somewhat peripheral to the plot of the movie itself, I like that my favorite astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, had at least a stock footage role in the movie, repeating his famous line that has now even become one of my favorite quotes on Space Jockey Reviews. He says, and I'm sure you'll remember this, I want to go to Europa and go ice fishing, cut through the ice, lower a submersible, look around, see what's there, see what swims up to the camera lens and licks it. I mean, that's just a classic line. If you watch any of the Universe on the History Channel or those space astronomy themed shows, I'm sure you've seen Neil deGrasse Tyson. So he just added a real element of the right now to it. I thought a great. You want to jump in and say anything?
Oh no, no.
Okay, because I'm
But I do have something to say when you're done.
okay. Well, you can say it now, or do you want me to continue on with my diatribe of science enjoyment here?
It was more of a question, so
Okay,
it
okay,
can
all right,
on
okay,
hold. You enjoy your science time right now.
okay, all right. I got to say this about the action. One of the biggest action scenes in the movie occurs when Andre and Corrigan need to go outside the ship to repair it,
Mm-hmm.
and Corrigan accidentally contaminates his suit with hydrazine.
Yeah.
I won't go so far as to say how it turns out, of course, don't want to spoil that, but it did remind me of a very similar scene from, guess what? Gravity.
Oh, you're absolutely
Yes,
right.
it really did. And related to that, as far as timing goes, it's interesting that Europa Report was released June the 15th of 2013, and Gravity was released nearly 4 months later in October of 2013. So this key Lost in Space type event had been done very effectively just a short time earlier in the same year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making comparisons of the two films overall based on that or suggesting that Europa Report should have won an Oscar, but it's worth mentioning, I think, at least as a parallel within the same time frame that struck me. So that's just a laundry list of, I guess, somewhat detached and compelling things that I found about the movie, but you have a question, so go ahead and unload that on me right now because we've actually just come to the question segment of the show. Unless you
Okay.
have more thoughts too.
Well, I do.
Okay.
It's not that I didn't I did find the movie entertaining, like I told you.
Okay.
Um, I didn't feel like it was a drag, but there were some down times, during the film that I felt that could have been filled with some stuff. Like just like you said though, I agree with you about the characters and how the characters were normal people. They were realistic. I like that as well. But there was one character where you didn't really get to know him that very well. I forgot his name.
I can give you a rundown here of the list. We had William Shue was the mission commander. James Corrigan was the engineer. Dr. Daniel Luxembourg was the chief science officer.
I think it was him.
Okay.
You didn't really get to know him. Like I felt like you got to not saying that you got to know everybody else. My mind just went blank.
I thought that was a blackout for a minute
No.
there. You know, a Europa Report interference of a sun flare that was affecting the show for a moment there. But
Oh.
go right ahead.
Okay, well maybe I'm confusing the two guys. Was it Corrigan who had the son, or was it Luxembourg?
Now, was it who did what?
Was it Corrigan who was talking about his son? That the next time he's going to see his son, he's going to be 6?
Well, that was the guy who went out to repair the communication panel.
Okay, right.
And I believe that was James Corrigan.
Right.
I believe it was.
That's what I mean. Like, I feel like in some ways you at least got somewhat of a little bit of background or something about each of the members, but I don't really remember him.
You don't remember James Corrigan much?
No, not James Corrigan. Luxembourg.
Oh, Luxembourg. Okay, Luxembourg. Yes, I agree with you there.
I just felt like all the other characters were developed a little bit more. And it's like they kind of forgot about him.
Yes, I do agree. I had not thought about that as much until you just mentioned it, but I do agree that he was the most underdeveloped. It didn't bother me too much because I felt like not knowing him as an isolated character not to know was sort of a real life example of how in every group of people you'll have one person who, no matter how much you may be around them, and in this case tight quarters, you just never really get to know them very much because even this guy didn't talk a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that added to, I guess, a realistic reason why we might not get to know him as part of his personality. Maybe that's just me trying to justify something, but I prefer to give things the benefit of the doubt if I can find it, and that's the only thing I can think of.
I think that you're right.
All right. It's great to be right.
I think
I was just had no idea where I was going with it, but I wound up being right. So there you go.
I think that it plays in with what you said with the characters being realistic. So that just joins in right with it. And I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, the way I figure it is, before I ever start to criticize anything, and in your case, you just, of course, brought it up for discussion and we worked it out. But I try to consider any possible way that the director or the writer may have intended something to be. And if I can come up through any amount of brainstorming with a way to explain it, then I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And that seems to work pretty well. So actually, I'm having a little more respect for everything as we talk about it, actually. So it's good.
All right. Well, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So is it time for some other questions?
Well, the questions are next, unless you have any more comments or thoughts to add.
No, that's it.
Well, I guess my first question, and you somewhat answered it earlier when you talked about the action that happened, and I think you talked about how you felt there was a little bit of a lull in the action. That I was wondering what you thought about the pace of the movie.
I thought the pace of the movie was fine. I wasn't, like I said before, I wasn't bored, but I felt like it did drag just a little bit, not horribly like the way some other movies do, but just where I wanted to see some stuff happen. And like by the time we got to the end, I was just thinking, well, that time could have been filled with some, cool chaos happening.
Yes.
So I didn't think the pacing was bad. I felt like it was realistic. While I was watching it, I didn't think about that just until we started discussing, well, until you started talking about it and talking about things being realistic. That's when that came to mind. So it kind of just makes sense that the pacing was the way it was.
I agree. It made sense. I've heard a lot of people criticize the movie for being too slow.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think the best movies are those that force the viewer to experience things the way they really would be, like it or not. And so then, if the viewer is appreciative enough of that real life quality about a movie, then ultimately they'll stop like you have and like I do and say, really, that's the way it would probably be on a ship traveling to Jupiter, a small confined area. It would probably give you this sense of boredom or inaction and all these sorts of things. And that's just the hard reality that I think a serious lover of science fiction or just good movies, I think they would appreciate that. And I did. So
Okay.
I agree.
Alrighty. I have a question.
Okay.
So I always have to go here.
Go right ahead.
What was your least favorite part?
My least favorite part. Well, the fact that I'm hesitating a lot means that, as you might imagine, I didn't really have a part that I didn't like. And if there was, I actually even thought about that before we did the show because I was just somehow prepared for the question. But I couldn't think of anything. There was never anything that jumped out as being a problem for me.
Wow, you really do love this movie.
Well, I don't know whether love is quite the proper emotion, but I did have a strong. Oh, let's just call it love. It's too difficult.
Okay.
Let's just go with. I'll just settle for love.
That's good enough.
Yes. Okay.
If not least favorite, was there a part that ruffled your feathers, made you like, oh my gosh, like have one of the, I don't know if you ever say, oh my gosh, when you're watching a movie.
Not really.
Wow.
I just can't really think of anything that even ruffled my feathers that much.
Oh, okay.
Or gave me a reason to put on my flight suit and eject and take my chances outside the ship. No, I honestly, I don't think so. Now, if something comes to me before the show's over, I'll be sure to tell you. But no, what about you? Obviously, there is something.
There is. And
There is.
honestly, there's only one thing. And that's really good because, when I watch movies, I have so much things that come across that's just like, why would they do that? There's only one thing.
Okay.
The character, I think her name is Katya. Katya?
Katya, yeah.
Katya, okay.
Yeah. You gotta get that Russian accent in there.
I'll try Katya.
Yeah.
Okay,
Katya.
that doesn't sound Russian.
Dr. Katya Petrovna.
Wow. You're really good with accents and languages.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, well, she kind of ruffled my feathers.
Oh.
Because I'm pretty sure you remember the part when she went outside the ship to get some samples.
Yes.
And I really, you could see the love that she actually has for what she was doing. They all had the love, but I don't know if you remember when she was outside that she was so happy. And I thought that was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can understand. I mean, I personally, I don't know. I just wouldn't want to do it. That's just me because I just feel like I'm just a girl who gets frightened of realistically things. That's a word. But when they were telling her, to come back. Okay, can I give a spoiler?
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay.
That's fine.
So you remember what happened to her. And, pretty much no one was, they told her to come back, and they told her a couple of times. And she's just saying, oh, I'm going to get closer to investigate. And it's just like, what? What did they just tell you? They told you to come back. And she just kept on following some light that she was seeing. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she's probably going to get like attacked by a light or eaten, or I didn't know what was going to happen. But I mean, I was clearly entertained. I felt some kind of way towards her. And I just didn't get why the captain, why he wasn't being stern towards her.
Well, to use a quote from the movie that I was actually going to include in the quote section, but here's the time.
Okay.
Compared to the breadth of knowledge yet to be known, what does your life actually matter? So I guess what you're saying here is you wouldn't sacrifice your life for such a breadth of knowledge for all the greater good of humanity.
No, I'm being honest. I know that sounds so selfish, but I'm going to be honest with you. No, no, I wouldn't. It's at least not in that way. I realized that's what she was doing, but guarantee, if I just personally feel like if people knew, like what happened with Corrigan, it was really unfortunate, and I could understand why they couldn't even let him back in. It was out of their control. It was out of his control what happened. But in her case, she chose not to go back in. She kept on going further out. And they told her, well, for her to come back. And I mean, maybe I'm just being selfish or being cruel. I'm not saying I laughed when something like when it, what happened to her. I actually thought that was really freaky. And that's another question that I do have dealing with that. I thought that it was really freaky what happened to her, but I just didn't get why no one wasn't saying anything or doing anything about it, because you already lost one person. And I'm pretty sure that wasn't, I know that that's, things happen, and sometimes it's out of people's control, but I honestly felt like this was in her control. Like if she would have just went back in, she could have got the samples. She had enough samples. In my opinion, like she just kept on going. Like I don't know, Chris. I'm sorry. Like I was really aggravated with her, and I found myself talking to the screen, and it's just like, yeah, this doesn't seem like it's gonna be a good idea.
Well, I think you've just made the case for something that has ruffled my feathers just in the course of you talking about it. I mean, you have just described it so well and in such a different perspective that I now officially declare this as the most disturbing moment in the movie for me too.
It was.
It was, and it makes sense. I guess my mind, as it often is, was just maybe someplace else. That is a scene where there are a number of different things you can be thinking about at that time, because it's a very crucial thing. There is something that's some great possible danger ahead and all this sort of stuff. I think my mind was a little more focused on something else happening. But at the same time, you're right. It wasn't as if that mission was completely doomed at that point. They clearly were still planning on getting home.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't as if a chance at suicide was just the better or just as good as anything else that could be done. So yeah, I agree. It was if it was me, I would have turned around and made ice tracks back to the ship there as soon as the radiation levels started spiking. Yeah, you're right. There was no real good reason. And I guess the more I've thought about it since you mentioned that, I do remember feeling the same sense of underreaction with the danger she was in at the time. Again, considering the the previous death of another crew member. And then even afterwards, after she had died, I felt there wasn't quite the sense of loss on the ship.
No.
Amongst the other crew members that I wanted to see.
Right.
Maybe if it was just a quick cameo of somebody crying, at least one of them having some big emotional issue over it, and I didn't see that, it would have made the movie better. But then again, I'm not sure where my mind would be if I was on Europa, all these impending dangers. I don't know.
Hmm.
So part of it is something that's impossible for me to really evaluate as well because not somewhat, it's actually totally out of the human experience, really. And
Yeah.
but that's a great point, though. Yes.
I just don't want you to think that I'm an angry girl. I'm not an angry girl,
No.
but I just thought it was kind of weird that, no one thought anything was wrong with it. And something, you are right about that, where no one really, I'm not saying that no one cared when she died, but they didn't really talk about it or show anything. They just moved on.
I really wanted Andre Bloch, the chief engineer. I really wanted him to break down and throw a fit of some sort because he seemed to be the most emotionally unstable
Hmm.
of the group at that point because of the loss of his friend
Hmm.
outside the ship. And then he was the one, as you remember, who was most opposed to her going anyway. He voted against it. So I did expect at least to see him doing something more emotional.
Right.
But, it didn't ruin the movie.
Hmm.
But you have a good point that I guess I just failed to notice when I was trying to uncover that ruffled feather event there. There it is.
Okay.
There it is. You have blown the wind that ruffled the feather.
Well, at least it's unruffled now. So,
Okay. No, it's very much unruffled at this point.
do you have any other questions?
Well, I have questions. Yes, I
Okay.
do. Somebody has to ask this one. What did you think about the design of the alien life form? Was it alien enough for you, or was it perhaps too similar to something we might find on Earth? Or do possible similarities really matter at all, especially in the way that life may evolve in similar ways in vastly different places anyway? And I only say that because people think that life on other planets would necessarily be something totally unlike anything on Earth. And
Mm.
even me, when I first saw this thing, it looked a lot like something that we do have on Earth, but it didn't bother me. Ultimately, I was okay with it. What did you think?
I felt like at first when I first saw it, I just thought it was like an octopus with
Yes.
flashlight eyes.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really impressed. But once I watched it again, I felt like it fit the movie well. I mean, it was still, for me, it was still kind of freaky looking. Especially I felt so bad for Rosa. She pretty much wanted to get that on. Oh, that's a spoiler. Is that a spoiler?
Oh no, no, not
Okay,
really.
well,
Not
you know,
really.
she,
We're
she wanted to get that on camera, and she did. I thought it fit the movie well. I don't really have any complaints about it. I mean, I was just, other than the first time, I thought it was just like an octopus or a squid or something. But I mean, it was okay. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so scared. I'm never looking outside again. I don't know. What
yeah.
did you think?
Like I said, when I first saw it, my first thought was squid or octopus.
Hmm.
But then ultimately, I again realized that so what? Life, it evolves in many different ways on our own planet. And who's to say that we couldn't have animals, life on other planets that look much like life we have here? Because they don't necessarily have to be so alien that it's outside our ability to even comprehend. Or I think it's just part of the practical ways that evolution develops life, the physical structures and everything that just work necessarily better. For example, on a planet that has a subsurface lake or water,
Hmm.
of course, something like much of the life we have living in water on our own planet is just the best way. Again, at first I thought, oh darn, it looks like an octopus, but then so what? It's just the hard reality.
Right.
Reality is not trying to be a movie.
Hmm.
If it is out there on Europa,
also that it's clearly a creature that's really smart if it was able to, because at first, when it came on, like when it was on camera and it was all the water was filling up on the ship,
Yes.
I was wondering, well, why is it coming on? Why is it coming in their space? What is it doing in there? I don't know. I'm thinking that they made it, smart to know that they're pretty much that the humans was invading its space, and it just seemed like it kind of wanted to get rid of them one by one, and it was able to, even though it got put on footage. But at the same time, it's like, what can we do about it from here, from Earth? If that makes sense.
Right. Well, my thoughts on that were one, what you just said, that it was acting on an instinctive level to defend its territory
Mm-hmm.
at whatever level of intelligence it may have had, whether it was intentional because it was more intelligent again, or if it was just pure instinct because it was a lower level life form. But I also, from the information in the movie, was thinking it was attracted to light
Mm-hmm.
because for some reason, because it was also a bioluminescent life form. Because when they were outside the ship, I'm remembering the engineer had told her to turn out the lights, I believe, at some point, because he realized that it was being attracted to the lights.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was a combination of those two things. As far as what sense it makes for it to be attracted to the light, I don't know. I admit I'm not a biologist, but it's a neat idea.
I thought so too.
Yeah. And what did you think about the ending? Do you think there was? I know you said earlier you felt a little bit disappointed by that, but do you think there's a sequel ahead?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think that it'll be pretty cool if there was one, but I don't feel that it's necessary to have one, because even though I was disappointed with the ending, because I simply wanted more, it kind of leaves the mystery, because there are a lot of things that we don't know that's going on out there. So I like that part of it, even though it wasn't a true story. It could happen.
Well, clearly it's totally set up for a sequel. However, I somehow don't think there will be one, and I'm hoping there isn't because I think this movie has a lot of impact exactly because it leaves you with that mystery in the end. Much like, now I'm not comparing it to this movie, but Alien,
Mm-hmm.
my all-time favorite sci-fi and probably movie genre type in general, the original one left me with that mystery, that desire to know more and just keep thinking all the time. And this movie has a lot of charm in leaving the viewer with that same feeling
Mm-hmm.
about what's out there. And plus, it makes sense in the context of a found footage movie. You're only going to get so much, and then it's over. The camera's gone.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
Was there something more scene or maybe even how we was talking about what the actual alien looked like? Was there a part in the movie that freaked you out?
I guess the closest to freaking me out was the scene where, and I'm forgetting his name, I guess it was James Corrigan,
Yeah.
floats out in space, and it's just that drifting away with the spaceship getting smaller and smaller, looking at that, feeling in the literally almost at a point feeling like I'm in the spacesuit. And it
Mm,
was the same feeling that I got in Gravity,
yeah.
except ironically, this movie was more of an impact. It was more of a freak out scene because he didn't get rescued. And we were with this guy drifting out there. I have a bit of claustrophobia.
Mm,
So being encased in a spacesuit like that, it was a bit of a freak out moment for me. What about you?
Oh yeah. Well, I was thinking that part was pretty freaky as well, but it wasn't until I saw Katya. Um, did I say her name right?
Katya, but
Thank
you're
you.
you're close enough.
Okay, I'm really trying, but it
You're
was. What's that?
I said you're doing a great job, so just
Thank
yeah.
you. It wasn't until I saw her part, because hers came right after, when they couldn't see her anymore, and the screen was going in and out, and it was black, and they could just hear her breathing,
Yes.
and then after a while they couldn't hear her anymore. I can't even imagine how she felt or how she felt when that was happening, and she's just all out there by herself. And as we could see, like, she couldn't take her eyes off of it. But then on the other end, they can hear her breathing, and then after a while they don't hear anything, and you can't really do anything about it. Just even something that we talked about before, it's just they voted to see for her to go out there or not. Especially for the people who voted for her to go, it's like, you should feel horrible right now.
Well, I guess ultimately you could feel horrible for participating in a vote
Mm-hmm.
and casting a vote in favor of the person going, but she really wanted to go. That was the only thing that made it okay, even I guess for a voter, is that she really wanted to go. But I do agree that was another scene that had me quite on the edge of my seat as well. Just imagining what she was experiencing, being pulled under the water as it seemed, and in the clutches of who knows what. A giant European squid of some sort.
Don't you wonder what happened to them?
I started to wonder, but my mind efficiently cut me off because I realized that it was a futile thing to wonder about.
Mm-hmm.
I realized I would never find the answer.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I realized it was, especially in this case, that it's just a movie.
Yep.
And there's a certain point where thinking too much about something that you'll never know, that didn't really happen anyway, is just a big waste of time, no matter how much I like movies. And that just sort of cut me off. But I agree. It definitely made me think. And I'm thinking about it again right now.
Okay.
It's stirred up the memories.
Pretty much all of them, they were some kind of scientist, right?
I would say they probably were, although I don't know about the engineers. They may have just been
Oh yeah, mine the
trained
same.
in mechanical issues, but other than that, I believe they all had a doctoral title of some sort.
Do you think that there will ever be in real life a trip planned to Europa?
I would say that if the human race can manage to keep from destroying the planet long enough to develop such technology, yes, certainly. It would be the most logical place to send a manned and womaned expedition out there anywhere
Yeah.
because yes, it is in fact known to have these heat signatures and have what is most likely water beneath the surface. And if there's any place where you get the biggest bang for your buck sending people and resources out there, that would be the place for sure. So, yes.
I wasn't too sure they would do that. This is just based on just me, just my opinion. I'm
Well, the other operative or key thing to consider there is that this was a privately funded
Oh right, right.
expedition. And
Mhm.
when you take it out of the government's hands and start dealing with privately funded things, it could go just about anywhere. In that context, probably even more so. Do you have any more questions, Zena?
That was pretty much my last question. Do you have any?
No, I don't think I do, but I do have some facts.
Okay. I have two.
You go first.
Okay, well, it was filmed in Brooklyn.
I did not know that.
The second one is people who helped with the film, they never said exactly who. They consulted with two scientists that worked at NASA. Yeah, so that's what I got.
Okay, well, I actually have more to add about that as well. I found
Okay.
the same about the NASA consultation, but I'll start with
Oh my gosh, Chris.
what's that?
No, I said NASA. It's NASA.
Nassau. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God. Okay.
Okay.
Well, you can go ahead. It's okay.
Okay. Which
You could just leave that in there.
okay. All
Everybody
right.
plays the
Yeah.
fool sometimes.
Yeah, we'll just leave that in there. Okay.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, it's best for people to experience this as we really are. Well, in the behind the scenes featurette on the Blu-ray, which you've got to watch, the CGI artists talk about how they intentionally made the video from the spacesuit and the ship cameras at a lower resolution than what was possible in
Oh.
order to simulate the way video from such cameras would really look.
Mm-hmm.
They even included the same type of high contrast images you would get with the brighter lights and deep shadows you really get in such an environment, as we know from moon photography and JPL images of astronauts in space. And a good example of this is when Katya is outside the ship gathering the data
Mm-hmm.
with Jupiter in the background.
Yep.
What's better to know about that is that the video footage from Europa was created, as you said, with consultation from NASA scientists and experts who know how things really look. They even added this level of accuracy at the risk of being criticized for being using low quality CGI. When I first looked at it, I admit I thought, wow, bad CGI. It was a
Mm-hmm.
little low resolution, a little bit just soft on details. And it really wasn't until I watched the featurette that I realized what I just said, is that actually we're talking about video images captured from spaceships and cameras used in space, and this is just what you get. I think bigger budget movies would have probably opted for the higher resolution images just to satisfy what people mostly expect. And I'm happy to know that Europa Report did not sell out on that.
I'm glad that they did it.
Yes. In the behind the scenes featurette, I also see you really got to watch this. I also learned that they used the highest resolution photos of the Connemara Chaos Zone on Europa that NASA currently has. So those are the real deal and not just images dreamed up by special effects people with a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Again, adding to more of that realism that most viewers don't even know they're getting. The CGI artists also said that they consulted with biologists to design a realistic bioluminescent creature that could theoretically really exist on another world instead of just, again, dreaming up something grounded in no scientific thinking whatsoever, which ultimately wound up looking like a squid with lights on it. But okay. In the movie, and this is really neat, a neat detail too, I enjoyed. In the movie, Europa is said to be 590 million kilometers from Earth, which is within a range of correctness, considering that the distance does vary during the moon's elliptical orbit around the sun. When the two planets are at their closest point, the distance to Jupiter is only 588 million kilometers, and that's 365 million miles for all you who want to convert it. At its farthest, Jupiter is 968 million kilometers, again, 601 million miles away. So what's better is that the mission was coordinated for the time when Europa would be closest to the Earth, according to scientific fact. And that's another small detail that they've gone the extra length to be accurate about. And you have to appreciate that because lots of even larger budget movies wouldn't have even cared.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the kind of thing you don't know unless you start checking the actual distance that Earth is from Jupiter. And you realize, like I said, that they coordinated it at the time that it was closest. So unless you're an astronomer, a physicist, or a biologist of some sort, I suggest that you watch the behind-the-scenes featurette before you start criticizing it or disliking it on too many technical scientific levels. Like me, you might actually learn a few things and appreciate the movie all the more. Another fact, Europa is Jupiter's fourth largest moon, for all those who care. And finally, there is, according to the movie's IMDb listing, an extended cut of the movie that runs 97 minutes, which is a full 7 minutes longer than the 90-minute version we've reviewed here. So I'm thinking there could be a director's cut in the works, and considering what mysteries of the universe are yet to be discovered, I may just have to buy it, but we'll see if that release even happens.
I hope that it does.
I hope it does too. So you said you had no more questions, or rather, no more facts.
No more facts. I only had 2.
So now we're into the memorable quotes.
Yes.
So, do you have any?
I technically have 2, but it's more 1 because it's kind of together.
Okay.
Andre says, "What would you do if you get out there and you find nothing?" And then William says, "Well, even if we found nothing, it's an effective discovery." And I thought that it tied in well, especially with the ending of the movie, because even though well, this is going to be another spoiler, even though everyone pretty much died and no one ever saw them again, they pretty much sacrificed themselves for
the greater good of humanity.
That's good. That's a good term. Words together.
Okay.
And obviously you can't be selfish. You have to be dedicated for something like that. I just feel like that just pretty much sums up the movie, even with what you told me with the facts. How they could have used a certain resolution, was it?
Yes.
For the film, but they decided not to. It just seemed like they wanted to base the movie based on actual facts and the storyline. And it's rare to see movies do that these days. So, yeah, that's my quote.
Okay. Actually, the quote that you had that was, "What will you do if you get out there and you find it?" That was one of mine.
Oh,
that was one of mine. No, don't apologize. It just shows that we agree.
Okay.
I liked this one. If we have any legacy at all, I would hope that it would be that we would inspire those who come after us to keep working, to keep questioning, to keep pushing the boundaries, to keep looking for the answers to those really tough questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Where did we come from? And are we alone?
Mm-hmm.
And this one. Compared to the breadth of knowledge yet to be known, what does your life actually matter? And I know we already talked about that one, but I couldn't resist repeating it.
Okay.
So we have our ratings. How many Queen Skulls does Europa Report get?
3.
Out of 5?
Yes.
Okay. 3 out of 5. I gave it 8 Space Jockey rockets. And for me, it wasn't a perfect movie, but 8 is quite a lot of rockets, actually. That's quite a bit of rocket fuel going on there. So, yeah. And if anybody wants to know what 8 means exactly in astronomical terminology, check my website. I'll think of any reason I can to get people to go there.
That's a good enough reason.
Okay, so, and last but never least, we have our conclusion. Just those parting words we have to leave with all the listeners about the movie that kind of sums it all up. You want me to go first, or?
Well, okay, you can go first.
I'll gladly let you go first.
No, you can go first.
Okay. Europa Report is an intelligent, scientifically serious ride to places the human mind can only imagine. The whole movie has a welcome, realistic feel as a throwback to days when movies were more than mere montages of action tacked together by sensationalism and over-the-top excesses. No, Europa Report is not a movie for everyone, but for lovers of movies that make you think, better yet, beyond yourself to boundless things unknown, it may be just the ride you're looking for. Otherworldly perspectives are explored, and ironically, within the human condition, you may even see yourself. And, to quote Dr. Katya Petrovna, if life exists on Europa, it will be the most profound discovery in human history. Who'd want to miss that?
Maybe you should have went last because yours just sound better than mine.
And now for the finale.
Okay. Well, I was just going to go back to why I'm giving it a 3 out of 5 Queen Skulls. I wasn't in love with the movie, but I didn't hate it. I was still entertained, and I do recommend it to people. So that's still, that's pretty awesome as well, because there's a lot of movies that I don't like. So This one isn't that. Well, just pretty much, if you're a fan of real science, I'm sure you will appreciate the director and his team and pretty much their attention to the details. If you're a fan of horror, this is pretty much a real life scary thought that could be a true story one day, very soon. Overall, I'm not saying that this film has plot-wise anything new to offer, but you will definitely be entertained. And I feel, and you'll actually learn something too. So that's important sometimes.
Yes.
It's really important.
And you'll actually learn something listening to this Dissecting Cinema episode. Yes. I can't imagine what better source there.
Yeah, maybe you should just listen first, even if you do get the spoilers, and then go watch it.
I think that this should be required listening for all those who plan to watch Europa. Yes.
I agree.
Okay. And on that note, unless you have anything else to say, Zena?
I do have one last thing to say.
Oh, okay. Go right ahead.
I don't usually, it's been a while since I seen a scientific movie, especially one that I liked and I wasn't bored with. Because even though it's a sci-fi, it's really, they do such a great job with details where it's actually true. And you could tell that either the director or the writer had a love for it,
Yes.
And it does show through. And it's unfortunate that this movie, it seems like it's underrated. It doesn't, I don't know anyone who's seen it, but guaranteed they've probably seen Gravity or Apollo 18. So I don't know. It's just unfortunate because this is a really good movie.
Yes, I agree. Very underrated. And I know it was not a big budget movie. So that's another very impressive thing about it, which speaks to the love that they had obviously put into doing this, despite the budgetary issues, working against them. I'm sure still produced an excellent movie.
Yep. That's it.
Okay. That is it for this episode. But be sure to keep those scalpels sharpened and tune in for the next Dissecting Cinema.